Thank you, Ivanka, and thank you all for the invitation to come and talk. Is everybody okay with the screen? Can you see it okay? Yeah, 10 minutes. I usually don't get as those of you know me know, I don't get my throat cleared in 10 minutes usually. And I have got a wee PowerPoint. I have to leave for 4 because I'm teaching through till 7 and miss the wine. You can put that on the recording. I wanted to just be very quick if I can be, and just talk a little bit about my own personal journey, and that's going to take maybe a minute. The first research that I was engaged with was with Irish Travellers in Liverpool, and at that point I'd done an undergraduate degree in sociology and I was doing a master's by research. And what I soon realized was that although sociology had given me great grounding in terms of being able to relate to the context and circumstances of Irish travellers' lives in the city of Liverpool, which, as many of you know, is a city with a long history of division, specifically sectarian division, but also division in terms of racism on a wider front, the whole construction of Irish-born black community, as many of you know. And I lived in Toxteth at that time, and I realized that the work that I'd done in sociology was insufficient to really help me to understand, comprehend, contextualize, and develop the experiences of such a tightly defined community. So the whole issue of Irish travellers and the enduring racism that they experienced took me into the world of policy, took me into the world of state intervention. But also, I had to become fairly quickly clued in to the whole arguments from an educational perspective, from a medical perspective, from all of those issues that come together in the lives of a community that is so clearly marginalized. I took that work directly into work in Toxteth, which is where I lived most of my life before I moved on after university. And Toxteth, of course, at that time was the site of the inner city uprising. Some people call them the riots. And I started doing work at that point on police powers and police accountability. And it became very clear to me that I needed to get some clearer understanding of the law, as well as the area of policy, social analysis, and all that had gone before. And I was very much involved with the community throughout those 2 or 3 years of struggle. And I started to publish around that area, and it became the focus, actually, of my doctorate. That took me directly, particularly in Liverpool following the death of Jimmy Kelly, and in London following the death of Blair Peach, took me right into analysis of deaths in custody, police custody to begin with, but then prison custody, and more broadly deaths at the hands of the state. And that work has obviously formed a major part of my previous research. And this, of course, was informing other work that I'd started to do. When I was about 24, I started teaching in a Victorian prison part-time in Liverpool. In those days, my hair was down here. I wore the standard sociology waistcoat, right-to-work badge, and collarless shirt and shades most of the time, as today. And of course, not something that endears you to, even today, let alone then, to prison officers and those who run prisons. But that was the beginning of a love-hate relationship that has lasted right to the present day. In fact, I was at a conference only yesterday concerning imprisonment here, which was about the violence of incarceration. And that's been part of my work all of the way through. And in fact, my most recently published book is on the incarceration of women here in the north with Linda Moore just before Christmas. And then when I moved here, I'd been heavily influenced by the debates historically around childhood and the issues that I'd been dealing with, how they are handed down, how they are received by children and young people. So that work became part of my work here, Childhood in Transition, as a crucial element of the work. But that again got put onto the back burner when, as many of you know, I took charge of or I was appointed to run the Hillsborough research for the Hillsborough Independent Panel, which published in 2012, late 2012, and I'm now special advisor to the lawyers who are supporting the families. The new inquest start on the 31st of March, and I'll be out of my job for much of the next year. But that work on Hillsborough also interplayed with other work I was doing throughout that time, for example, on the shootings of Dunblane. I just wanted to make a few points. How do we know what we know? Why weren't we told? A really important question. And what is reliable information and scientific analysis? Part of the research that I've been involved with, well, all of it really, connects to power, state power, the construction of ideology, regimes of truth. In other words, the issue is around ways of seeing, ways of understanding. And one of my major criticisms about the academy is its intellectual collusion with those power relations. I've always been interested in dissenting accounts and building alternative discourses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. Being there, bearing witness, I see as being part of the research responsibility, and that would be a major element of my work. Because we've got such short time, I just wanted to make the clear statement at the beginning that critical research, for me, critical social research, encompasses a range of disciplines. It includes the formalized domain assumptions and boundaries of academic disciplines. In other words, it breaks with that. It breaks with the tradition, am I a psychologist, am I a sociologist, am I a political scientist? Critical research needs to draw on all of those areas, particularly having cognizance of the historical and contemporaneous issues around oppression. And in my book, Power, Conflict and Criminalization, I argue that the revelation of context, locating moments, events, responses within their structural determinants, that is part of the construction of what we see as personal troubles. That's not my phrase, that's C. Wright Mill's phrase from 1959. The second level concerns the discovery of what Stan Cohen called, the late great Stan Cohen, troubling recognitions that have been denied, neutralized or reconstructed. So it's about developing troubling information, and that's what I see critical research as being. So very briefly and quickly, how do we do that? I mean, the first issue for me is I suppose I'm part historian. Official historical accounts, contextualizing legal and policy reform, that notion of history from above, the history that is imparted to us. But for me, it's about building alternative accounts, personal oral history. What the wonderful Frigga Hagen, the Das Argument Collective in Berlin, argues is the construction of memory work. This is about building history from below. So what I'm saying is that in terms of all of the research that I would develop, the historical context is all. And it's about having the skills to understand central government, all of those range of issues, parish, church records, courts, whatever is relevant to the field, building the records and archives issue, archives bank of material is crucial. Also, I would include in this biographies and autobiographies. That's people's own views from below. And so one of the key skills for any critical researcher is how we engage documents. And I've just given a whole list there of the familiarity, the skills that are essential for that. It's not just about researching documents. It's about understanding the formulation of policy. It's about being able to have a socio-legal grasp of law reports, legal commentaries and opinions, to be able to evaluate them appropriately. But also, when it gets down towards the bottom, we're looking at official statistics. So there is a certain, even in my qualitative work, there's a statistical significance to what I do. In terms of also then taking the issues more broadly into context, researching the print media has been essential. And those of you who sat through my postgraduate research tutorials know that I extend that right the way through the whole of the print media, and it's absolutely crucial to my work. I'm going so fast because I'm being told I've got 1 minute. So experiential context, however, is the really important part of my work. And what that is about is respecting social life at the level of appearances. That's an Eric Olin Wright kind of phrase. Establishing, as I've said, the view from below, interpreting and theorizing resistance, understanding contextualizing agency, and seeing people as agents of conflict and change. In other words, it's about engaging the real world, understanding the dynamic between action, interaction, reaction, the social and cultural expression, personal perception, individuals' definitions and understanding of situations. And that is a commitment to what I call appreciative studies of the distinctive world, in my case, of the deviant, rather than the notion of criminal, the outsider, the marginalized. And that is the construction of telling it like it is. So how do I pull all of that together? Well, in all of the work that I do, I don't see myself as a sociologist or as a socio-legal scholar or even as a criminologist. I see myself as a critical theorist and a critical analyst. And what I need in all of those situations is to be able to integrate the core critical elements of each of the disciplines which I draw on. And I am completely committed to the integration of work rather than the siloing of research as it has been historically into distinctive disciplines. That's my TED talk for today. Good night and good luck.
Are there any questions for Professor Scraven since he has to dash?
I'm teaching at 4, so I'm going to have to fly. So if anyone's got any pressing questions or queries, I'm quite happy to answer them quickly, even quicker than I spoke. Yeah.
Do you think you mentioning there academia could rise to become a vehicle for resistance, maybe to sort of the top-down histories, or however you describe them? Do you think one problematic feature of academia at times is it tends to kind of indulge in very high-level rhetoric, can be very kind of become its own little internal world and be swapped amongst kind of high-thinking scholars, but it becomes very hard to penetrate high-level academic discourse and rhetoric sometimes and distill principles that you can apply to real life or use to resist. In some extreme cases, postmodernism, which is taken to an extreme. If you want to reject truth outright and, fall into this melting pot of rhetoric. Do you think that's a problematic feature? Or
you saw my face change the minute you mentioned postmodernism. How long have we got? I mean, for me, I think that the scholar, the person who's developing their analysis has to work at three equally they're equally measured levels. They're not, there should be no hierarchy. I've always resented and resisted the idea of high theory, that high theory is something that is distant and is something that we get involved with in the ivory tower. I'm perfectly capable of writing in that style, and I'm perfectly capable of understanding it if I give myself the time to do it. Perfect example of somebody who would be an accessible high theorist would be somebody like the late Barbara Hudson and her work, because she is a theoretician, but she always has the applied construct in terms of where she's taking her work. So for me, it's important to be able to write in that style and understand that work. In other words, to take the theoretical debates further, particularly if you're developing interdisciplinary work. However, its drawback for me is not, I don't see myself as an applied scholar. I see myself as a critical analyst. And if I'm doing that, and I need to understand the underlying theoretical debate, I need to have read all the Foucault, in other words, even if only to discount 3/4 of it. But I mean, I need to have a good grasp of that theoretical analysis. But at the same time, it's the application of that analysis to the real world that really is significant for me. I see no point, personally, I see no point in scholarship for scholarship's sake. I do feel that it's important to develop the work in a way that has a critical application and brings about social change. The reason that I came into academic work and I went through working with the Travellers and so on was I wanted to see social change, and it's a particular significance to me at this moment. When I look at the impact of our 4 researchers based here on Hillsborough, and I look at what we produced, and I look at what the outcome of that has been with the largest ever criminal investigation in British legal history, the biggest IPCC investigation, new inquests, and that all came out of scholarship. It didn't come, and it came out of interdisciplinary scholarship. It didn't come out of sitting there and thinking, how do I best theorize this? I'm perfectly capable of doing that, and no doubt my day will come when I'll sit down and do that. But the important issue for me is initiating and developing and promoting social change. I don't see any point in doing the work I do if I don't try at least to make a small contribution to challenging conflict and resolving social change. And I do think there's a tremendous distancing of academic work as it's evolved at that kind of level that we were talking about, a distancing from the real world. And that's great, and I don't have no problems with people doing that, but it's not my bag. Any other quick comments? I'll be quicker on the others. Okay, if people want to contact me for any of the stuff, I mean, I've written quite a few research papers that have dealt with research, particularly around the women in prison material that I've just been talking about, and also researching the view from below. My email's pretty easy. As they sing on the Cop at Anfield, there's only one Phil Scraton. So p.scraton@QUB, and anything I can do to help any of your work, just please write to me and I'll send you whatever I have, whatever I can contribute to your work. And best of luck with all. For those of you who are working on your doctoral work, best of luck. It's a tough call, but enjoy it as much as you can.